On this edition of Sightings, a mysterious force lashes out at the residents of this house.
We got fresh blood here.
In this Sightings exclusive, a dangerous spirit makes contact.
We cannot, in our own bodies, make that sound.
Then, secrets from the Red Empire. The Soviet military called it Height 611. A UFO crashed here, and now the evidence is analyzed.
It could very well be of an extraterrestrial origin.
Plus, it may not have been a hoax after all. Witnesses tell us that Nessie lives.
All I can say is that I saw a very large creature, living creature, for sure.
And this boy's mysterious connection with dolphins leads to a miracle.
The dolphins just went crazy. It was like he had come home. He was in heaven now.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. Since Sightings went online, your response has been staggering, and no story has generated more email than our series of reports on the Heartland Ghost. We heard from skeptics, believers, and many viewers who had good ideas about how to broaden our investigation. So good, in fact, that we decided to put them into action when we returned to the house with world-renowned parapsychologist Carrie Gaynor. For the Midwestern family who lives here, the last 2 years have been a paranormal nightmare. They've asked us not to reveal their true names, so we're using the pseudonyms Pam, Jeff, and their young son, Donnie. When Sightings first came to document the phenomena here, we were stunned to see long, bleeding welts forming on Jeff's body. He believed it was the work of a child ghost the family calls Sally.
I personally want it to stop.
We contacted parapsychologist Carrie Gaynor, whose groundbreaking investigations of the entity and poltergeist cases have made him an undisputed authority in the field.
This is the beginning of the research, and a lot more needs to be done in order for me to really feel comfortable that this is a legitimate case.
So, Sightings returned to the house on 2 subsequent occasions, and each time the pattern of bloody welts appeared on Jeff.
The number one question that friends and relatives that do know of our situation ask, and I'm sure probably every one of your television viewers ask, is why do you stay here? Why don't you just get out? You know, what holds you there? Curiosity. There needs to be more data so that we can know what exactly this is, what causes it. Why do these things happen to certain people, certain places, certain times?
Based on our initial findings, Carrie Gaynor joined the Sightings investigative team on our most recent trip to the Midwest.
Tell me about your fear level in the beginning and how you feel now.
After viewing hours of videotape shot in the field, Carrie Gaynor sat with Pam and Jeff to develop a detailed profile of the ghostly activity. We also put in place an arsenal of electronics, oscilloscopes, frequency counters, and surveillance cameras that would monitor the house continuously. Much of our equipment was concentrated in the nursery, where earlier photographic anomalies had been recorded. Another camera position was at the top of the stairs, where, on a previous visit, psychic Peter James had encountered what he felt was a frightening entity.
I'm getting a lot of resistance right here at the door, meaning whatever is in the room wants me out.
2 cameras were placed in the living room area, where many people had experienced strange events.
Our pictures on the wall are turned upside down. The vacuum will turn off when we're vacuuming. The TV will come back on after we've turned it off. The stereo will come back on after we've turned it off. My son's musical toys will play for no reason.
We were now set to monitor any anomalous activity that might occur inside the house. We turned the family kitchen into a control center. Audio transmitters were placed around the house and separate video recorders assigned to each camera. We also set up a handheld thermal imaging system. Any unusual cold spots would turn the normally red tones of human flesh to blue. During this setup, producer Craig Armstrong had his own encounter.
There it went right again, right over here. But I get like a cool right here. It's really weird.
Perhaps it was a premonition of things to come, or a result of what Peter James had felt during his psychic investigation when he sensed death and despair.
I do feel, as we speak, that over the years that at least 3 people died in this house.
Our review of town records confirmed Peter James's psychic impressions. 3 people did, in fact, die in the house. One in 1872, another in 1900, the last in 1918. We unearthed their death records on the eve of our all-night vigil. Cary Gaynor asked that his investigation continue by low-level lamplight.
All right, why don't you make a request, anything that comes to your mind.
Sally, could you do this for me, please? I'd like for you to show them that you're really here.
No one in the room heard a response, but our videotape recorded a chilling sound. We've asked 2 independent experts to analyze the sound and determine its possible origin. We'll bring you the complete report on their findings later in this program.
Talk about not having much longer. Understand
During the time that the strange sound was being recorded, only one of 2 oil lamps began to flicker. Although the wick was trimmed, the windows were closed, and the air was still. Then, a few minutes later, Jeff felt a bizarre chill in front of him.
Yeah, we've got a new scratch. Yeah, we got fresh blood here. This wasn't here 2 minutes ago.
It was just one of many scratches that appeared periodically throughout a night of bizarre events. When Pam walked in a specific area at the top of the stairs where many had felt a menacing presence, our frequency counter suddenly and inexplicably jumped from 399 to 575 megahertz. Earlier in the day, in the same area, one of our surveillance cameras picked up large amounts of interference, seen here in slow motion. But this camera was on a closed circuit, and it would be impossible for it to pick up electrical interference. And in the nursery, video signals seemed to drift and then disappear entirely, although there was no break in electrical power or the video cable. After a few moments, the signal returned to normal. The next morning, a sense of calm returned to the house. But for paranormal investigator Cary Gaynor, it had been an unforgettable night filled with unexplained events.
Yesterday and last evening, I spent about 14 straight hours here investigating this case. During that time, Jeff was attacked 11 separate times. There were 11 separate instances of scratch marks on his body. Some of the scratches were very thin, and some were very thick, welt-like scratches that were really quite frightening. Now, I was sitting here, he was sitting here, he was within a foot or 2 of me, and I had him under my supervision at all times. If he got up and walked away, when he came back, I asked him to take off his shirt so that I could examine what marks were there to make sure there was no trickery involved. During the last 20 years, I've investigated about 850 cases, and during that time, I have never come across anything like this. I think we've got something very interesting and very exciting here, and really potentially dangerous.
Coming up, is this the sound of a dangerous entity communicating?
I've never heard anything quite like it.
Our startling discovery is analyzed next.
During our most recent investigation into the Heartland ghost, we heard this.
I'd like for you to show them that you're really here.
That anomalous low-level noise wasn't heard in the field by producer Craig Armstrong or any other member of our crew, but back in our Sightings offices in the midst of an edit session, Armstrong and editor Mark Quinn Anderson heard the ghostly sounds that seemed to come in response to Jeff's plea. We We immediately took copies of the suspect tape to 2 diverse audio experts. Rick Wilson, president of Digisonics, is a forensic audio specialist who works routinely with the CIA and FBI, and has also analyzed black box recordings for the FAA.
We looked for a lot of the characteristics that would immediately identify it as a definitely mechanical sound, as a definitely electronic sound, and those were ruled out. See, one thing that makes this sound interesting and eliminates a lot of possibilities right off the bat is that above about 500 hertz, there's nothing there. There's nothing in this sound. There's a lot of background noise, but that's constant before and after the sound. But when this sound comes in, it's all low frequency, and that's it. And we cannot, in our own bodies, make that sound.
If the sound is not natural, could it be supernatural? For an answer, we turn to electronic voice phenomena authority Sarah Estep.
I've been taping for 18 years, and I've investigated a number of haunted homes, houses, properties, locations, and I've never heard anything quite like it. It sounds more like an energy sound, perhaps put out by the other side. It's interesting that it came right after Jeff asked Sally to please let them know that she was here. And then this low rumbling sound started and built up in volume, an energy sound that perhaps they produced at his request. Very, very interesting.
Is it a ghost? I really have absolutely no way of knowing. I really don't. My best bet is that it's something magnetic. And how that magnetism was introduced is anybody's guess.
I'd like for you to show them that you're really here.
Many people have asked, why doesn't the family simply move out? And in fact, they will be moving as soon as possible. Sightings will continue to keep in touch with the family to see if the haunting activity follows them, or if it remains in the house.
Next, is it all a lie? A new high-tech investigation, and terrified eyewitnesses tell us that Nessie lives.
I was shocked, rigid, totally shocked.
Drumnadrochit, on the shores of Loch Ness, is the town a monster built. Since the 1930s, thousands of biologists, zoologists, and tourists have flocked to the Scottish Highlands in search of Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. But recent revelations about hoaxed photographs and phony reports are putting a serious dent in monster mania.
Suddenly I saw this colossal great hump, about 60 or 70 feet long. It looked black against the water, you know, and it was going fast against the wind.
All I can say is that I saw a very large creature, living creature, for sure.
I'm convinced there's something. What is it? I don't know, but there's something definite in the law. That's big, that's moving, that's alive.
Scores of once skeptical eyewitnesses now believe that there is a lake monster hiding in Loch Ness. And the loch can hide its secrets well. 900 feet deep, 23 miles long, and 1 mile wide. It's been estimated that there is enough water in this lake to submerge the entire population of the Earth, all 5 billion of us, 3 times over. That's certainly enough water to hide a small population of unknown aquatic predators.
The thing turned and came streaking across straight towards me. I was looking from here across the castle, and it came straight towards me very fast from the far side of the loch, but there was no head and neck showing then. There was just this great hump.
The hysteria over the Loch Ness monster really took off in the 1930s, when a spate of photographs and films captured the world's imagination.
Here is the most unusual film of recent years, for it proves the existence of a monster in Loch Ness.
Taken in 1934, this is the world's most famous photograph of Nessie. Called the surgeon's photo, it has colored our perception of what the monster looks like for more than 60 years. But a recent in-depth investigation by Alistair Boyd has turned up compelling evidence that this photo is a fake.
People have pinned their faith on that photograph. They believe in Nessie because of that photograph, which is a very dangerous thing to do, because all that is a little image on a piece of paper or on a negative, and at the end of the day, that is all it is, and in fact, it's a model built on a clockwork toy submarine. There isn't any doubt about that.
The 1-foot-high monster was made of plastic wood and set atop a toy submarine. But one hoax does not explain away hundreds of other credible sightings. Even after many crop circles were exposed as fakes, there remains extensive documentation that not every one of them is man-made. It's the same at Loch Ness. Some things just cannot be explained away. Naturalist Adrian Shine has been studying the loch for the last 20 years.
The 1980s were really the time for sonar. The classic photographs had already been dismissed. The underwater pictures were controversial. Sonar was the one area in which it seemed that you could get reproducible, unusual results. And we believe that sonar has revealed some unusual objects in the water column, but the argument is about what they are.
A submarine is the newest addition to the Loch Ness research effort. Captain Alan Whitfield has experienced some mysterious contacts deep under the murky peat-stained waters of the loch. In July of 1994, a cruise ship above Whitfield's submarine picked up an unusual image on its sonar. It appeared to be a very large object moving deliberately through the water, shadowing the submarine.
Two targets came up on the screen. One, obviously the submarine, hard target at a depth of about 450 feet. The second target was quite large, according to the captain, possibly as big as a submarine.
This was definitely a substantial echo. When we saw the large object below the submarine, we immediately contacted the submarine control.
Now, when asked, were we towing anything, were we flying anything, we said no, we're doing nothing that we didn't normally do. So obviously something was out there.
The question now is not if, but what is roaming the vast blackness of Loch Ness. And ironically, revelations about hoaxes have helped rather than hindered serious investigation.
The surgeon's photograph, when it was revealed to be a hoax, it got rid of a lot of dead wood, it got rid of a wild card. There's never been a sighting like that since, and before for that matter. The head and the neck doesn't exist. So now we can concentrate on what we feel are the right sightings, the humpback. This is what's come forward so many times.
Alistair Boyd has revealed many Nessie photographs to be hoaxes, but he's not only a debunker. His intense interest in the subject is the result of his own life-changing encounter at Loch Ness.
There was a large body clearly in the middle of these flippers. There was a kind of a sort of vortex effect following it. As it went round, I mean, I thought that's probably that. And then this huge hump came out of the water. It was rolling forward as it came out. It was like a whale. It was black. You could see the water running off its back as it came out. When it actually stabilized, there was no less than 20 feet of it actually sitting there still. You know, for several seconds, it was just sitting there. All I can say is that I saw a very large creature, living creature, for sure. Certainly not a boat wake, certainly not a log, certainly not an otter, certainly not birds or anything else that I've ever seen here.
Sightings traveled to the far side of the loch, to the small town of Doors. Like Drumnadrochit, the locals here believe that there is something in the loch. But unlike the tourist center to the west, people indoors keep their sightings to themselves. You won't find souvenir shops here, but you will hear about Nessie if you know who to ask. In 1993, fisherman Roland O'Brien saw something amazing.
It was a large, dark hump, possibly about 8 to 10 feet long, about 4 feet out of the water. It was dark in colour. And there was no head or neck or anything like that. I couldn't see anything like that at all. In the middle of the body, there was a splashing commotion at the side of it this time, not in the front of it. I don't honestly know what that was. It could have been a flipper. Then proceeded to within about 250 yards from the shore, whereupon it just sank again. No commotion at all. It just sank completely out of sight. And basically I was shocked rigid, totally shocked.
The many credible eyewitness accounts stand as the only reliable proof of Nessie's existence. After compiling the characteristics common to those sightings, we can build this profile of the Loch Ness Monster. The sightings are of a large hump, no head or neck. The creature can move swiftly against the tide. There are fins at its side. It is black and resembles a whale. When it submerges, it goes straight down. without a ripple, and it is huge.
60 years have gone by, and what do we actually know? Very little, very little. Everybody has theories, but to my mind, there are too many theories at Loch Ness and not enough people out here watching. I think if everybody who's ever put forward a theory on the identity of the Loch Ness Monster actually had put in 1,000 hours watching, there wouldn't be a mystery.
Where are all the scientists who once considered Loch Ness their second home? Well, many of them are now concentrating on a more promising lake creature called Champ. Champ is Nessie's North American cousin and is thought to inhabit the deep waters of Lake Champlain.
It's been a mystery since 1986, but now there are answers.
It could very well be physical evidence of an extraterrestrial origin.
And later, a little boy's special bond with dolphins leads to a miracle.
An alien craft hurtling through space at 1,000,000 miles an hour crashes to Earth. Debris is scattered over a desolate landscape. The military moves in and retrieves the evidence, covering up their tracks. But this isn't a story about Roswell, New Mexico. It's a remote place called Height 611 in eastern Siberia, and Sightings is there to investigate.
Many UFO sightings have occurred in clusters called flaps, and ufologists charge that military bases are the object of alien reconnaissance, especially bases where nuclear weapons are stored. In recent years, sightings have occurred near military installations in New Mexico, Nevada, and Florida. The U.S. military base in Bentwaters, England, a nuclear repository for NATO, was the site of a series of UFO sightings and power outages over several days in late December 1980. We are now learning these encounters are not limited to the West. A series of sightings over the Siberian cities of Vladivostok and Dolnogorsk have some convinced that extraterrestrial spies are surreptitiously observing military installations in the former Soviet Union. Vladivostok is home to the Russian fleet, including nuclear-powered submarines.
It is a place where UFOs are sighted very frequently and where similar phenomena occur.
Alexander Rempel is president of the Vladivostok Association of Ufologists. An engineer and former military officer, Rempel has amassed a catalog of local sightings.
This is a panoramic view of Vladivostok. In broad daylight, people suddenly saw a bright flash up in the sky, and this glowing sphere rose up. One passerby had a camera and shot this object.
This photograph of what appears to be a strange three-toed footprint was shot near a Vladivostok military installation.
The traces left by these unusual beings are found at the sites of well-guarded military units. This is where radioactive waste from Russia is kept.
A few miles away from Vladivostok, near the small mining town of Dolnogorsk, a UFO crashed on this hilltop in 1986. The site, known only by its height, Height 611, is littered with strange debris and is considered to be one of the most significant UFO locations in all of Russia.
The sphere was red, it was flying straight and then sharply fell down.
I saw a fiery balloon fly from this site and fall there on this knoll.
After that, a fire started. It burned for 1 hour.
The first person to reach the scene was biologist and Academy of Sciences Meteorite Commission member Valery Duzhilny.
Something was burning. This could have been a meteorite, but meteorites do not cause fires. When I climbed up to this place, the snow was deep. There I saw a place which left a great impression on me. There was no snow, it just evaporated. I saw the remains of a burnt tree and the remains of metallic spheres.
Samples of charred metal gathered at the site attracted nationwide attention. Analysis was done by Russia's most prestigious academies.
Whatever remained at the site itself had such unusual properties.
Paul Stonehill, head of the Russian Ufology Research Center headquartered in the United States, has examined many of the samples from Height 611.
The mesh itself had something very strange, very unusual, tiny filaments. And inside those filaments, quartz filaments, one could find yet other filaments or nettings, gold nettings, 7 microns thick. I mean, a human hair is 56 microns. Now, we have no technology to insert gold filaments of that size into quartz filaments. What they could be used for remains an enigma.
It's an enigma that continues to draw serious attention from Russia's top scientific researchers.
Their Academy of Sciences has had an ongoing public study of UFOs since the 1970s.
George Knapp is an investigative journalist. He is frustrated by the seeming lack of interest in UFOs by American academics.
Here, the people like Carl Sagan say, you can't study UFOs, there's nothing to study, there's no physical evidence. Well, that's baloney, and the Russians are proving that. Their Academy of Sciences, the most respected scientific organization in that nation, has been studying it for decades. They do what scientists are supposed to do. They take samples, they conduct experiments, they dig in the soil, they check for radiation, and they've come up with some fairly amazing results.
In the case of samples collected by scientists at Height 611, the results are startling.
It could very well be physical evidence of an extraterrestrial origin. That was the conclusion of the initial scientific team that went to the site. There were strange alloys in there that couldn't be readily identified. Rare earth metals in combinations that have never been seen of a natural origin.
Here we can see the results of our tests. The sample contains elements such as lanthanum, nickel, and some others. But most importantly, it contains the elements promethium. The element promethium is artificial. It cannot be found on the Earth.
Human subject testing also took place. In a controlled study, physicians and medical researchers examined those who had worked at Height 611 in the days following the UFO incident.
Samples of blood, blood pressure and pulse were taken. For the group that went to the top of Height 611, the number of red blood cells, the differential blood count was altered, and the amount of elements in the blood rose. In the meantime, the control group's blood tests stayed normal. I believe that either alien machinery or a spaceship fell down and crashed. I think that otherwise it cannot be explained.
Doctors and researchers inside Russia continue their investigation, while a handful of American experts are still having difficulty convincing our own scientists of the importance of Height 611.
Height 611 is extremely important to pay attention to. I'm glad that somebody actually went to that Height 611 and brought out the information, because the heights we could reach with that information are still unknown to us.
Our crew returned with this microscopic metal fragment entrusted to us by our Russian contacts. Analysis of this crucial bit of evidence will take many months. We'll bring you the results of our findings on a future episode.
Next, an unusual connection between a dolphin and a little boy brings about a medical miracle.
They were like soulmates. They bonded and they just connected.
As recently as 20 years ago, children with Down syndrome were considered hopeless cases. Doctors routinely recommended that the children be placed in institutions so their parents could get on with their lives. Today, parents of Down syndrome children are getting on with their lives by keeping their children at home and exploring alternative therapies. In one unique program, they're getting astonishing results.
They are an unlikely breed of therapist. Dolphins who swim freely yet seek out the company of humans, especially humans in need. No one knows why a unique bond exists between people and these aquatic mammals, but it's there, and its effect is measurable.
I think the reason that dolphins are interested in human beings is because they're very intelligent, and there's a real sensitivity that they seem to have.
Dr. David Nathanson is a psychologist who has found that dolphin-assisted therapy is a powerful tool for teaching neurologically impaired children.
About 15 years ago, I was very interested in taking a look at doing some research with animals and children, because I've worked with disabled kids for about 30 years. And there are three things that they seem to be most interested in: animals, music, and water. Animal-assisted therapy, generally, if it's done properly by experienced people with gentle animals, is very effective. But dolphins are especially helpful because the additional dimension of being in warm water and the fact that the dolphins are so intelligent and sensitive makes it almost kind of the optimum environment for healing.
Kathy Anderson already had two children, Mia and Andrea, when her son, Dean Paul, was born.
When Dean Paul was first born, the feelings were very mixed. I knew immediately as soon as I held him that he had Down syndrome. It was kind of a scary feeling, but then I also knew that somehow, some way, everything was really going to be all right.
He wasn't like a normal baby. He cried, but he didn't, that's about it. He didn't make any noise, just kind of laid there. He was more like a doll than anything else.
Down syndrome is a congenital disorder in which there is an extra chromosome present in each cell of the body. The condition causes toxins to build up between the brain and the skull. As a result, the brain cannot grow to full size.
Most kids with Down syndrome are in the moderate range of mental retardation. Some are in the mild range, some are in the severe range.
When Dean Paul was first born, the doctors said that he would be a vegetable, and that was the word they used. He would not have thought processes. If we were lucky, he would eventually walk and be able to dress himself and maybe be able to feed himself.
Kathy refused to accept the dismal prognosis offered by Dean Paul's doctors. The whole family worked tirelessly to try and motivate Dean Paul's progress using traditional therapy techniques. But even after 2.5 years, it seemed that it would take nothing short of a miracle to elicit even one word from the struggling toddler. Then Kathy Anderson found her miracle, gracefully swimming circles in the dolphin tank at the local zoo.
Our first visit to the Oklahoma City Zoo was when Dean Paul was 2.5 years old. We went to the zoo because they had just opened their Aquatica show, and since I love dolphins, I was going to go see it, and he was going with us. We got into the dolphin show, and he sat up straight, his eyes flew open, and his mouth just gaped, and he didn't take his eyes off the dolphins. I was amazed. He had never paid that much attention to anything and for that long a period of time.
He went up after the show when they were feeding the dolphins, and there was a lot of other little kids there, but he just stood and just stared at the dolphins, and they came right to him. They didn't go to their food, or they wanted to play with Dean Paul, and they were talking to him and splashing him, and I remember the smiling gone on his face.
It was a breakthrough moment that would eventually lead Kathy and Dean Paul to Dr. Nathanson and his dolphin project in Miami, Florida.
Dr. Nathanson told me at the time that we talked on the phone that he was seeing sometimes as much as 10 times the learning abilities and speed with the children that he worked with. And he was seeing great strides with kids with Down syndrome in their communications and speech development, which of course Dean Paul was really behind in.
With just a glimmer of hope that Dean Paul might benefit from dolphin therapy the way other children with Down syndrome had, the Andersons left for Florida.
There were two problems with Dean Paul. One was that he was pretty withdrawn. And the second is that his language was severely delayed. In Dean Paul's case, he loved the water, and he loved working with the dolphins. I wouldn't let Dean Paul interact the way he wanted to unless he tried much harder. So he was highly motivated, he paid attention beautifully, and as a result, his language started to improve, his confidence started to improve, and he got to go in the water a lot more. And this was very important to him.
The first time Dean Paul had therapy, the dolphins just went crazy. They just were jumping and screeching and yelling at him. It was like he had come home. He was in heaven now.
What was it about Dean Paul that drew the dolphins to him and allowed him to utter his very first sounds?
Within less than 20 minutes, he was working with the dolphins and just having a great time at it. He became immediately more verbal. Just vocalizations of any sound were welcome. I knew he had the capability of sound. Now he was using it, and he was using it for communication.
In the months that followed, Dean Paul literally came alive. The dolphins were succeeding where science had largely failed. The little boy who couldn't talk or run or swim disappeared, and the real Dean Paul was emerging.
Showed him picture boards, and then he was to make an attempt to identify the picture. If he identified it correctly, then he could give a signal to the dolphins or have a swim. He progressed so rapidly that soon he was in the water doing his picture boards from the water, and would do 5 to 10 of them before he had to have his reward.
In general, I think animals can sometimes reach people when people can't reach them. And that kind of unconditional love and interest in the child is a remark. You know, don't forget, if you're a child with a disability, let's say Down syndrome, and you're walking in the supermarket, some people are friendly, some people are not friendly, just on the basis of how you look. That doesn't matter to the dolphins.
But the bond between Dean Paul and the dolphins transcended unconditional love. It went even deeper than that, especially with one dolphin named B.
The experience that Dean Paul had with B was incredible to me. They bonded immediately. It got to the point that he couldn't even do therapy with her because she would just take him away and take him out to the middle of the pool and just stay there.
Dean Paul's relationship with B was almost maternal. They bonded and they just connected. They were like soulmates.
B then became very ill after we'd moved to Miami. And she would only come up to the front of the pool when Dean Paul was there. Then one day, she didn't come up to the front of the pool.
2 nights later, Kathy was awakened in the middle of the night.
Dean Paul had been sound asleep. He sat straight up in bed and said, "Oh, my B," and climbed out of his bed and raced to the front door calling for B, just, "Oh, B, B." After I took him to school the next morning, I got a phone call that B had died in the night. And knew then that she had died at that time.
While children like Dean Paul are considered disabled, they also seem to have a singular ability to understand and communicate with these silent, gentle sea creatures. Dean Paul attended dolphin-assisted therapy weekly for 3 years, and as a result, he now has near normal skills in cognitive and neuromotor areas.
I feel that Dean Paul has progressed past the normal mold that we've put kids with Down syndrome in. If you see him out on the playground, you can't tell Dean Paul from any of the other kids.
But a natural disaster brought Dean Paul's therapy to an abrupt end when Hurricane Andrew forced the Andersons to move back to Enid, Oklahoma.
Dean Paul hasn't been with dolphins for almost 2 years now, and he cries for them often.
The realities of life have severed the loving bond that Dean Paul once shared with his dolphin therapists. The dolphin's unique role in his learning experience has no human counterpart and simply can't be replaced.
When we return, Dean Paul will once again swim with the dolphins for the first time in almost 2 years.
When Sightings returns, doctors begin to understand the mysterious connection between Dean Paul and the dolphins that transformed his life.
Sightings wanted to know if Dean Paul Anderson's amazing success could be documented scientifically. To that end, we brought together the Andersons and the Aquathought Foundation. That's a research organization which studies the effects of dolphin interaction on humans. We sponsored the trip for scientific reasons, but the rewards came straight from the heart.
The remarkable progress of Dean Paul Anderson has been studied and analyzed by psychologists and physicians around the world. But unfortunate circumstances have prevented Dean Paul from having any dolphin contact for over 2 years.
He surrounded himself with his dolphin pictures early on, but then took them all down. And I said, "Why have you taken your pictures down?" He said, "I just miss them too much."
Sightings arranged for the Andersons to visit a facility in Cancun, Mexico called Scarret. The dolphins at Scarret are not involved in dolphin-assisted therapy, but do interact with humans on a regular basis. Our goal was to try to document any measurable effects when these new, unfamiliar dolphins met Dean Paul.
What we're trying to find is some sort of explanation of why there's a perceived healing phenomena by the humans after interacting with dolphins.
David Warner is a neuroscientist at Loma Linda University Medical Center and a researcher with the Aquathought Foundation, a non-profit organization which studies the as-yet unexplained link between dolphins, healing, and their beneficial effects on the human brain.
I would say that Dean Paul's interaction with the dolphins has profoundly altered his course. My personal opinion is that there are several factors involved here. One is just the pure stimulation of being in the water with a large, intelligent mammal.
To document Dean Paul's encounter with the dolphins in Cancun, Aquathought researcher and computer specialist David Cole accompanied our Sightings team to Mexico.
I'll ask you to do a couple of things for me, okay? We take electroencephalographic information from 16 points on the scalp, and then it's visualized using the Mindset product. And our visualization takes the electrical information and relates it back to a picture of Dean Paul's brain.
Before he even sees the dolphins, a detailed recording is made of Dean Paul's brain waves. This information will later be compared to recordings made after his dolphin swim. It's an attempt to quantify what everyone on our team experienced emotionally when Dean Paul began his swim.
Why do I think these are Dr. Dolphins? When you have, for instance, a child like Dean Paul in the water with his mother, and take a look at the way the dolphins behave, they're genuinely interested in him, and I think that they have the potential of sensing his disorder.
When studying the literature, one finds a common phenomena reported in that the dolphins, when interacting with children, are gentler. They seem to recognize that this is a more fragile individual. The hypothesis is that the dolphin identifies the difference in the child that is ill and seeks out an interaction with that child for what only the dolphins really know.
What we're seeing here is Dean Paul's brainwave activity before he entered the water with the dolphins. The blue and green is demonstrating high-speed brainwaves. This relates to a state of consciousness which is not conducive to efficient learning. Mindset is showing us an increased amount of warmer colors in Dean Paul's brainwave activity after swimming with dolphins. And this definitely would indicate a more conducive state for healing and learning.
Dolphins use a complicated echolocation sonar system to help them maneuver through the water. It's a natural form of radar. Dolphins are able to send out sound waves that travel through the water and bounce off objects in their path. The returning sound waves allow the dolphins to create a mental picture of the object. Remarkably, because the human body is mostly water, a dolphin's echolocator is able to pick up the images of a person's internal organs, their bones, and their brain.
The dolphin echolocation energy, which can be quite intense, is strong enough to make changes in the body actually at the level of the cells. For some reason, those physiological changes push the organism, in this case the human being, into a state of better health.
The universal pleasure that we see in the children that do experience this is quite profound. So even if scientifically we're running up a dead end, behaviorally we're dead on track.
If we can prove something definitively that being in the water with a dolphin affects your brain in a way that's potentially beneficial, then we've opened the door to serious research.
For now, the proof is in the child. He was never supposed to speak or laugh or play. But Dean Paul does all that now and more. Science may not know why, but the Andersons do. They call it dolphin magic.
Kathy Anderson reports that since Dean Paul's return from Cancun, his comprehension and retention skills in school have dramatically increased. Kathy reports it's as if everything just clicked.
If you've had a paranormal experience, call the Sightings hotline at 1-900-933-SIGHT. That's 1-900-933-7444. Each call 65 cents a minute. Average call lasts 3 minutes. Sightings is also online. Our email address is sightings@aol.com.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, The Sentinel.